Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, joined as always by our producer, Justin Stein. And today the Jamboree is back. We've got the SIS Football Research team, Alex Vigderman, James Weaver, and Bryce Rossler here. And we've got some fun little Midseason Awards lists to hand out today. And the way we decided to do this, these guys know me well, and they know usually in the background when I'm not in a meeting, seems to be like most of my days. When I'm not in a meeting at work, in the background, I'm usually listening to the Levitard Show podcast. And the Levitard Show guys are known for top 5 lists. And in the spirit of that, paying homage to that, we will have a few top 5 lists today. So for the Midseason Awards, I will be bringing the top 5 quarterbacks. And up after that, we'll do the top 5 offensive non-quarterbacks. We've got Bryce Rossler to bring us that list. From there, we'll go to the top 5 defensive players. James Weaver's on top of that one. And then Alex is going to bring some special awards to the table.
Yeah, we'll call it like the top 5 weird other awards.
Without further ado, we can get right into things. First off, top 5 quarterbacks. And I got to come clean here. I chose chalk. My top 5 quarterback rankings completely agree with total points per 60 snaps. 1 through 5, the exact same order. I didn't choose it that way intentionally, but then I went to compare it and I was like, oh, geez, look what I did. So without further ado, the outside looking in, just outside of my list were Joe Burrow and Jacoby Brissett. Joe Burrow, probably not super surprising there. He's been good this year. The Bengals are probably better than they were last year in a weird way, even though they probably won't go to the Super Bowl. I don't know if you guys disagree with that, but he's kind of my unsurprising outside looking in one. The other one is Jacoby Brissett. And Jacoby Brissett, I think, would shock everybody. So far, being 7 total points overall to this point throughout the season. I was on with Aaron Schatz and Mike Tenier of Football Outsiders earlier today, and they agreed that surprisingly in DVOA, Jacoby Brissett's been pretty good this year. So not sure what you guys make of that, but he's about to lose his job very soon.
Yeah, he came up. So Brissett has come up a couple times when I've evaluated total points, and he's come up as like a surprisingly good performer. And I didn't really know what to make of it. There were a couple of games when he was with Miami where the offensive line play was like so horrendous that from a total points perspective, he got so much credit for the offensive line blowing a million blocks that even in a blowout loss, he performed above average. So this is not entirely surprising to me that he has this kind of performance through a handful of weeks. And it's a good enough supporting cast that kind of can help him matriculate the ball down the field, so to speak. But I think it's certainly any time that a guy like that is at the back end of your top 10 when you are not naming the Rodgers, Brady, whatever. Like there's a lot of top quarterbacks that are not on that list, or guys with top reputations that are not on that list.
Yeah, guys that will not be on my top 5 list this year include through the first half of the season. Aaron Rodgers is not there. Tom Brady is not there. Who else am I missing? Like
Stafford.
That you might expect. Yeah, the Super Bowl champion. He's not there. Derek Carr's been a guy that's usually been on this list at this point of the year. He's not there. At least the top 10, maybe not the top 5. So yeah, this is based on this year. Okay, without further ado, number 5, Gene Smith. He's been good this year.
Like not just productive, like actually watching him, he's really good.
I think it's interesting with him. I feel like he and Mariota had kind of a similar, like they had both kind of performed better than you would have thought in small roles over the last couple of years. Like every once in a while they'd come in a game and they look kind of interesting. And then they get these starting jobs and you're like, well, now they're going to be exposed. And like, well, Geno has not been exposed. And that offense, a lot was made of Russell Wilson and the situation he was going into in Denver. But like the situation he was leaving from a pass catcher perspective is really good. And that really helps out Geno, and like them having originally they had a running back who runs himself into a wall and gets himself hurt. And now they have Kenneth Walker, who is kind of, they just have this like rotating cast of injury prone running backs, and maybe Kenneth Walker will be the stopgap there where he stops getting hurt. But it's a pretty good offensive skill personnel to help him out.
They have the two rookie offensive tackles, Abraham Lucas and Charles Cross, but it's particularly noteworthy that the line as a whole has improved from the lens of how much pressure they've given up in the absence of Russell Wilson. And I think part of that is Russell Wilson is not particularly renowned for his pocket presence, and Geno Smith has been really good in that aspect this year. So that's
Bryce, to your
awesome.
point, the pressure rate has completely changed, but the blown block rate, the offensive line performance is not as disparate as you think it would be. If you look, I've got the Sonar depth chart for the Seahawks on right now, which can be found on 3013.com. It's completely free for any of the listeners. You can look at the Seahawks depth chart and see that Charles Cross is the only one that's performing above average so far this year on that line. This is not that they totally remade things and fixed everything. It's that they're playing within the scope of what they're capable of at this point. It really, really got off the rails there, to your point, and what they were last year. And I think Geno Smith doesn't deserve credit for having outrageous accuracy splits or this deep ball that's doing anything or anything that's special in terms of his talent. I just think that they're running the offense and he's doing it in a competent way and not just maximizing the plays that are there, but minimizing the bad plays too.
No, yeah, I was going to add to that in terms like with Geno Smith playing within his realm and not, forcing anything bad. He's top 5 in EPA per play under pressure, and he has the highest pressure completion percentage. So he's been doing well holding up even when the pressure's coming to him.
All right, moving on from number 5. Number 4, I hope I'm not going to offend you here, Alex. Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts has just been my 4th best quarterback on the undefeated Go Birds so far this year. That sound about right to you?
Yeah, I think that the offense is very good, and they've been able to, as has been a big deal, they've been able to get up to big leads and kind of cruise in the second half. But and we talked about this, many other weeks this season, like having the mix of AJ Brown and Devontae Smith in the passing game really gives him a lot of leeway, a lot of ability to not make mistakes, because he's actually been more accurate this year. You've had fewer cases where he just makes these like really off target throws, but also in kind of the same vein that like what the Bears are doing with Justin Fields, like he's very confident in his ability to scramble and get out of trouble. And even if he just gets like 2 yards, he's not putting the team at too much risk. And every once in a while, those scrambles turn into big plays. And they're not putting him, this isn't like a Josh Allen type thing. Like he's not having a ton of designed runs, but he is able to use his legs to extend plays, but also just sort of like get out of a tough spot, get a couple yards, not take a sack, and not throw a 25 yards downfield weird interception. Like he's done a really good job of limiting the mistakes by just sort of taking a couple yards scrambling.
To your point about how, what he's had to do fitting in, Jalen Hurts, if you look at the Eagles Sonar depth chart page on 3013.com, it's just all orange on offense. Like everybody's been a really high performer this year. It's been a great offensive line. Obviously 2 really good receivers there, and he's fit right in. He and the next guy on the list that are going to bring up are 2 people that I would have said they're in good situations and they're doing that. But I would have never thought that he could be as accurate as he has been this year. We used to always believe that you really can't teach accuracy with quarterbacks, but it looks like in the case of Jalen Hurts and, spoiler alert, Josh Allen, that's not true anymore. Like people can learn accuracy, it seems. Not everybody can learn accuracy, right? But like, I don't know, this is something that basketball figured out a while ago, that you could teach people to shoot, even if they hadn't previously been shooters. Look at Jason Kidd. I think that the way that I look at quarterbacks now, and specifically quarterbacks with suspect accuracy, I don't think they're going to become pinpoint quarterbacks. But if they do have the arm talent to kind of get it together, I think it's kind of out there at this point that is something that is sort of malleable.
Hurts is not Josh Allen, and he doesn't need to be with the kind of receiving talent that he has on the team. And that's sort of the point of designing your team in this way. And if you have a good enough scheme that gets guys open, like he doesn't need to be elite from an accuracy perspective. He just doesn't need, you want him to not be a minus, especially given the athleticism. Like the advantage that both he and Josh Allen have is that they don't need to be the most pinpoint accurate to be valuable quarterbacks. That's not true of Mac Jones as a hypothetical example. Like he needs to be accurate in order to be a valuable quarterback.
And as I'm sure Bryce would point out, if everybody wants to play too high in quarters, they're going to make it really difficult for you. Number 3, I already gave it away. Josh Allen. Anything anybody wants to add on to that one? I had a hard time with 3 and 2. That was the hardest part of my list.
No, Josh Allen is a lot of fun, and it's particularly endearing that he still has these lapses every few games where he just does something completely slapstick.
Oh, there's the guy that I remember.
Yeah. Where he looks like Josh Allen at Wyoming. It's fun. I mean, he's to his credit, he's done a really good job at limiting that stuff. It's not as prevalent as it was during his first and second years in the league, but that still jumps out a little bit every now and then. He's really fun to watch because the running, he's got a bazooka arm, but then you also get the blooper reel stuff that
that's the part about him like being their number 1 running back that I really don't like as much, because I think when those moments come for him, it's when he's trying to do a lot, when he's trying to play from behind, when he's trying to really like put the team on his shoulder. And he's talented enough that he can do that at times. But when it becomes kind of all on him and it's his responsibility and nobody else's, I think you're kind of begging for those moments to come up. And I don't know, even with all that, I think they're the obvious Super Bowl favorites.
Yeah, even so, that's like obvious, like with his running style. You see him lowering his shoulder. He's gaining an extra 4 or 5 yards, which, I mean, obviously that's not how he got hurt in hindsight, but just doing that, you always have to hold your breath when that stuff happens.
Well, as our studies have shown over and over again, it's about getting hit while you're throwing and getting hit while you're on the move, specifically like scrambling but still looking to throw. That is when the most injuries occur. It's not on the quarterback design runs. It's not on sacks. It's those plays that are the most dangerous. It makes sense. But then what can you do about that, right? Other than just not put the ball in his hand 70 times a game.
Yeah, the only version of that you could, that's the piece where a guy who gets the ball out quickly, Tom Brady survives because he lives to fight another day. And he doesn't get that extra value of being able to scramble and make big plays with his legs and whatever. But the value is that he stuck around for 20 years because he was able to duck and cover and didn't have a neck injury derail his career.
A little shot at Peyton there.
Well, I mean, because I picture Peyton doing the like crumple onto the ground thing when in certain situations where he was like, I'll take a sack. That's fine. Just don't injure me. And
brother was really known for that.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that these guys who bring a lot with their athleticism, we haven't had a generation of those players who are, we have the Drew Breeses and Rodgers is like the closest thing to that kind of quarterback who's made it that far. I mean, because like Big Ben is just like, he's like a big dude, but he's not he's not running around. So it'll be interesting to see how many of these kinds of quarterbacks, like now we have this sort of like golden age of like pretty mobile quarterbacks, to see how they are able to sustain that into their, mid 30s.
You mean we stopped requiring that the most important player on the field was also the worst athlete? And so now, oh, wow, look at how this works. Didn't we figure this out 2 weeks ago, though? Didn't we figure out, like, you want the Jalen Hurts that is going to look to throw and is capable at it, but then he's going to scramble and become a runner and not be playing a risky style of football. And you don't want the Carson Wentz, even though maybe that's like scarier when it looks good. It's not sustainable.
Yeah. I mean, but even so, thinking about like Russell Wilson and like his situation is kind of weird just because of the sort of his particular choice of style and the circumstances of being traded and such and that sort of thing. But like he made a big point of being mobile, but getting out, not getting injured, sliding, really protecting his body. And then more recently has sort of stopped doing much of that at all. And are those players, is everyone who's like that, short of the Lamar, Justin Fields type athletes, like are those guys all going to sort of do that? And then you're really losing that edge that you had when they were younger. And obviously that's not relevant at this moment. Mid-season 2022, none of this is a problem. But as a longer term prospect for those kind of guys.
All right, my list is eating up the whole episode, so we'll keep it going. Number 2, after Josh Allen was at number 3, and I said it was close. Number 2 is Tua Tagovailoa, and number 1, Patrick Mahomes. 2 to number 1 was not particularly close to me. I know some of the more older school quarterback metrics might have that with Tua ahead, or even some newer fangled ones. There's a lot of good things about Tua's game. I put him at number 2, but it really hasn't been close to me compared to what he's done compared to Mahomes. You also figure in he's missed a couple of games, but the gap between their total point rate, Mahomes is putting up 12.2 per 60 snaps. Tua's putting up 11.7. That's not a big gap. When you compare that number 2 to number 3, Josh Allen's at 9.2 total points per 60 snaps. So a much bigger jump there. I still had a harder time given that Tua has missed a few games, and that should figure into a midseason award. But even so, he's just been so efficient when he's been out there that I gave him the nod ahead of Josh Allen, even though Josh Allen is his whole team's offense. I'm not saying he's the second most talented quarterback in the league. I'm not saying he's the second guy I built my team around. But for the first half of this season, he's put up 71 total points. Josh Allen's put up 76 total points. And Josh Allen's played in a few more games than him.
You only need a driver's license to drive a Ferrari, man. That's all you need.
So you're giving all of the credit to Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, even though we literally saw 2 other licensed drivers that could not have the same success on the track.
Oh, he's better than Teddy Bridgewater, but that's not a particularly high bar to clear.
Okay.
And McDaniel's been really good. McDaniel deserves a lot of credit too.
So where would Tua be on your list this year? So far this season, the guy that leads the NFL in quarterback rating and EPA per attempt and
You're
all
bringing
whatever
quarterback rating into this? What's going on?
I just want to name whatever stats you want to that aren't our stats, and just explain to me how the guy that's number 1 shouldn't be in this part of the list.
I mean, if you're going to use stats as a crutch, I don't really have an argument. I'm just, what do your eyes tell you?
What do my eyes tell me? My eyes tell me that Tua is very accurate. Tua has the ability to make decisions quickly, not always correctly. I do think he's a bit of an inconsistent decision maker, and that's been the case this year. But Total Points is aware of that. I believe that he does not at this point in the career have the arm strength to reach Tyreek Hill, but it's worked out in the form of lots of defensive pass interference calls to his advantage so far this year. And I think that at the end of the day, I think he's a win-with quarterback. I think that the biggest risk is that he can't stay healthy, and that's going to continue to be a risk as we go on. And that's the biggest negative about his season to this point. But I think that when you look at the production, and especially the change in production from when he's been there to when he hasn't been there, I think that he deserves some of the credit for getting these historically great receivers the ball.
I agree. He deserves some of the credit. I agree. He's a win-with guy, but I'd personally put him in the 10 to 15 range.
In terms of how they're performed so far this year, or in terms of talent? Okay, I agree with that.
I think it'd be really interesting to see where, if you swapped Tua and Hurts, what they would each look like in their offenses, because they feel very similar.
They would both look bad.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. I think that they feel very similar.
Jalen Hurts, Jalen Hurts can't do what Tua does, and Tua would die doing what Jalen Hurts does.
Well, I don't mean trying to run around more, but I think both of them from I see what you're saying in terms of Tua's accuracy, but the deep ball thing, yes, deep balls are less common and you have more room for error on throwing a deep ball.
He's got all the best stats on deep balls so far this year, Tua. Even though those balls have not been pretty, he's got the best stats compared to anybody.
He's actually less accurate than he was last year on deep balls. Which is kind
because they've all been off target catchable. They've all been Tyreek Hill can catch it if he slows down.
Right, and he's 15 yards open. So yeah, I mean that's the thing is you can get away with that kind of stuff, and you can get really good production when you have hyper elite athletes that are getting schemed open in kind of insane ways.
Jalen Hurts is a much better deep ball thrower, but Tua is much better in quick game stuff.
I mean, I think you could put if we're doing a talent thing, put Mahomes and Josh Allen in their own bucket, And then Tua, Jalen Hurts, and Geno Smith aren't next on my list by any means. But I just think those guys have been good so far this year. I'd pose this question to you, Bryce. Who would you rather have going forward? Jalen Hurts or Justin Fields?
Ooh.
It's not a simple question. Their stats are very different. It's not a simple question.
Probably Fields. I know that would be a contentious.
I think I said the same thing 2 weeks ago when you were not feeling well. So
Fields has looked pretty good this year, but not this year, but the past few weeks he's starting to come around.
Okay. Anyway, that was a fun little debate. Thanks for not brushing that under the rug, Bryce.
You're very welcome.
I'm not into it on. I'm not a card carrying member.
You were raised a Dolphins fan, so I had to.
I do think he can win. I'm still watching the games with my brother and my dad and communicating with them about what they see and what I see. And I see a guy that has very good accuracy, good decision-making and processing ability. Like I said, I think it could be very good, but there are times when it's inconsistent. And, generally it's hard to argue with the production so far this year.
I know, I hate it.
But he ain't Mahomes. All right, that's my top 5 list. Let's brush Bryce's top 5 list under the rug. I'll give you the mantle. Who do you got at number 5?
All right, so number 5 is Nick Chubb for the Cleveland Browns. I know that people don't believe that running backs matter, or that they should be paid, or that they're even human beings, but he's been really, really good this year. The Browns' rushing attack has been really good this year. It's on pace to be one of the most efficient of all time, if not the most efficient of all time. I don't have the exact number in front of me. Chubb is first in rushing total points among running backs. He's second in the league in broken and missed tackles right now. You can make an argument that he's not as valuable in the passing game as some other running backs, whether that be as a receiver or a pass protector, but I think he's probably the best pure runner in the league right now. And he's been a lot of fun to watch. I know you can say that rushing's not efficient as passing and beat that old drum and play the hits back, but he definitely deserves mention among the top 5 guys in the league in terms of non-quarterbacks on offense. Yes,
I'll put it in context a little bit. He was good last year. Everybody knew he was good last year. He had 35 broken and missed tackles rushing last year. This year so far, he's just one off that pace. He's got 34 to this point. So didn't play the full season last year, 14 games, but he had a good season overall. He's been that much better even as a ball carrier this year.
Yeah, he's been incredible. He's a lot of fun to watch. He's gotten better. He's for my money, he's the best running back in the league right now.
So what we're saying is that the 3 and 5 Browns are led by one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL and one of the best non-quarterback offensive players in the NFL.
I'm not saying that.
No, we said Jacoby Brissett he was an honorable mention because it was fascinating that his numbers look good. So we did it.
And I don't want to jump ahead, but it's very possible that we'll also name a Browns player in the top defensive players leaderboard. I'm just saying this team is stacked.
Chubb and Garrett are really good. Nobody's right. Like,
who said it was Garrett?
Just guessing.
Yeah, that's a real shot in the dark.
But I thought you were going to come with the classic like running backs don't matter argument there, Alex, being like, 3 and 5 with Chubb, and what's Las Vegas's record with Josh Jacobs?
I mean,
you that is also Alex than that.
That's
Alex.
That's an argument you can make. I'm not interested in making it, but they are theoretically an example of that, and so are the Raiders, and so are the Titans, and
you can be good at running and not good at winning.
Yeah.
Bryce, number 4.
So I had a bit of a dilemma between number 4 and number 3. And you could probably swap these two if you wanted. So I'm interested to hear how you guys would stack these two. Number 4 for me is A.J. Brown. Right now, he's first in receiving total points on both a volume and a per route basis. He's second in yards per reception, second in yards per route run. And I think a big part of why the Eagles are arguably the best team in football right now is because of him. I think he's helped that offense and Jalen Hurts quite a bit. That's not saying anything revelatory that like a really good receiver helps elevate your offense, but he deserves a lot of the credit there. And then number 3 I have is Stephon Diggs, who is just behind him in a lot of these metrics. He's second in total points on a volume basis, second in total points per route run, and then third in yards per route run. But I just think Diggs is a little bit better as a player. Like, if you watch them, for my money, he's probably the second best receiver in the league right now. He's really good route runner, really good against press, catches the ball really well, good athlete, good with the ball in his hands. But he's not as big or as physical as Brown, but I think some of the more nuanced stuff he's a little bit better at, which we might expect because he's been in the league longer than Brown has. And I also thought that it was really interesting, the on-off splits with him on the field versus off the field for Buffalo. Buffalo is like plus 0.28 EP per play when he's on the field versus when he's off. It's like 60 some plays that he's been off the field. But as far as I could find, that's the biggest discrepancy of the big name wide receivers. When you look at the total points leaderboard, it's bigger than Brown, it's bigger than Hill. And I know that on-off splits are fairly confounded, but I thought that was interesting. So I would be interested to hear how you guys stack that too, because it's really close, and I had a tough time with this one.
I have no qualms, and I think that they're completely neck and neck. Let's hear what somebody more biased thinks.
No, I think that's fair. I think that although I'm, extremely balanced, whatever, in talking about this kind of stuff, I do think it's interesting that Brown has had a lot fewer targets than the other guys who might be ahead of him on this list. And that shows like he's had a lot of sort of bang for his buck when he has been targeted, and has gotten a lot of big plays and touchdowns and big third down completions and that sort of thing. And yet it still feels like he transformed an offense. And that can like bias our assessment of things when you see a guy show up in a new offense and suddenly that offense is sort of like unlocked to a certain extent. I think that the fact that the Bills have been like as good as they have for a few years now makes Diggs sort of a little bit less impressive feeling. But I think I would probably put Diggs ahead of Brown as well.
Yeah, Diggs is he's not the shiny new toy for Buffalo. He's been there.
And yeah, I'm good with it too at the end of the day. Diggs does a little bit more before the catch and probably at the catch point. AJ Brown does more after the catch. But then also I didn't really look at it in terms of the volume this year. Diggs has had a bit more volume. And he's probably, these guys are both so hard to replace. They're right there.
James, are you going to save us with some definitive contentious take and put on like a Skip Bayless, Stephen A type of performance, or where you at?
Nope, not at all. I'm going to agree with everything you guys said. It's neck and neck for me. Maybe, like you said, AJ Brown probably a little bit more on the deep ball threat, a little bit more boom plays, but other than that, I think you're right there.
Consensus or hive mind, depending on how you want to characterize it.
All right, who's the number 2 offensive non-quarterback at the midway point?
So I'm going to do kind of a boring one. I'm going to say Tristan Wirfs.
Ooh,
I would argue that's not boring. Yeah.
Yeah, but like people don't watch football on Sundays to fixate on offensive line play, right? Like it's something that's noticed peripherally. But I mean, he's just really fun to watch. Like he's probably the best tackle in the league right now. And he's only in his third season. He's big, he's athletic, he's really, really smooth, and he doesn't really make mistakes. I think in like 400 some pass blocking reps, he has 2 blown blocks. I know the Bucs are not super fun to watch right now. They're a bit dysfunctional on offense, but it's certainly not because of him. They've got him for 2 more years. He made All Pro last year, first team. He probably will make All Pro first team this year. Again, just a really fun player to watch and still really young, but again, probably the best at his position right now.
Yeah, he's the highest ranked tackle by total points so far this year, and he has not had a holding call against him, on pace to be even better than he was last year in a lot of the metrics that you mentioned. He seems like he's here to stay.
And for what it's worth, like the Bucs run a lot of plays. So like part of the total points thing is that he has been on the field a lot, but even so on a per play basis, 3rd among tackles. So,
all right. And then can anybody guess my last one?
Yeah, I could guess it. I was going to be mad if it wasn't him.
Yeah, it's Tyreek Hill. That's who you had in mind. I don't think you can make a case for anybody else right now.
I agree with you 100%. You talk about transforming an offense, like AJ Brown's done a lot, but Tyreek Hill, like the only way you can make a case against it is like that you're either in Tuanon or you're Mike McDaniel is just, he's the reason. And it's not the players that actually are important, which is really insulting to the players. He's absolutely transformed the offense. They went from terrible to good. Solidified a couple of things up front in terms of the offensive line, but they're still not great up front. Jalen Waddle's now their number 2, and he's probably the best number 2 in the league as a result, right? You don't just, it was like when Stephon Diggs was added to the Bills, the way that it made all their receivers much better. And Tyreek Hill's on pace. He already has 1,000 yards.
He already has 1,000 yards. He's got
he's 200 yards. Yeah, he's got 200 more yards than anybody else.
Yeah. And so he's on pace to not only break his yardage total from last year, which was 1,239, but he's also coming for Megatron's single season record. It'll be interesting to see if he needs 17 games to do that, or if he even gets it at all. But yeah, his yardage is crazy right now. And then even if you look at beyond the counting stats, third in total points, first in yards per route run at nearly 4 yards per route, which would far and away be the best for as long as we've been charting it, if it holds over the course of the season.
32% target share, 8 out of 12.7, and 76% completion when targeted. Like, that's not real.
Yeah. And it's really kind of interesting because he's not like a prototypical wide receiver one. Like, if you think of like,
he's small. He's not big.
Yeah, he's small, and typically we've thought of guys like Julio Jones, Calvin Johnson, big height, weight, speed guys, but he's also not the best catcher of the football, I don't think.
And he still isn't. 5 drops so far this year, on pace to basically match where he's been at the last couple of years.
Yeah, but he's just so fast. He's really, really good with the ball in his hands, and he can destroy press. The way he gets off the ball, whether it's his press or off technique, his releases are really good. And I mean, he's just too fast.
He uses his speed in a different, like, there are guys who are fast and there are guys who are agile, and some guys are both, but he uses his speed and agility so effectively in a way that Kadarius Toney does not, in a way that Darius Hayward-Bay did not. Yeah. Like the some guys are fast and some guys are quick, but like he exploits that so well.
He's the fastest dude I've ever seen, and he's quicker than he is fast, which is just crazy.
And the way he releases, and like the way he mixes up the tempo of his release, and like when he decides to go it's
frightening. Because even when they're double teaming him, he'd help over the top, they're still frightened by it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's why he's open for these 12-yard throws over the middle of the field. Like,
yeah, he'll release like he's ready to go on you, and then it's, oh crap, and then he breaks off a slant, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it.
Yeah, huge credit to Frank Smith, their offensive coordinator in Miami too. I think he's somebody to watch in the years to come. Sort of could be like an Arthur Smith type future head coach candidate. All right, so that is the top quarterback. We end up with Mahomes. Top non-quarterbacks, we end up with Tyreek Hill. It'd be awesome if we could see those guys play together, huh?
Imagine.
James, let's flip it over to defense. What do we got?
I'm enticed to hear what you guys think about 5 and 4, because this is the one I was kind of splitting hairs between and couldn't figure it out. I decided to go with the more sticky metric, I guess to say. So at number 5, I went Nick Bosa. He's tied with the second most sacks in the league at 8.5. And even though he's tied for 12th in pressures, obviously he missed some time, but he's still been a dominant force for the 49ers defense that's looking just as fine or just as good as they always have in the past. And then deciding with him with 4, surprise, surprise, from before, I went with Myles Garrett. He's 6. Yes. He's 6 with 7.5 sacks. And he's second in pass rush total points, even though being 7th in pressures. So he had more pressures than Bosa. So that's why I decided to put him higher up there, even though Bosa had more sacks. And Garrett also has 2 forced fumbles. So I'm excited to hear what you guys think about these two, as I think my top 3 is pretty solid, though.
I think it's not even close. I think Myles Garrett's been miles better than Nick Bosa. I think that despite Garrett being on crap defense, he's been their saving grace. And Bosa, it's been fine. I don't see him as a top 5.
Fine? Nick Bosa is fine?
First half of this season, Myles Garrett, I'm taking him every day before I want Nick Bosa. Or how they perform this year.
You more of a Sauce or a Quentin Williams guy?
No. This Nick Bosa disrespect is crazy to me. I think it's pretty close between him and Garrett in terms of how good they are. I don't begrudge you having Garrett first or before Bosa, but I think I think the talent there is much more comparable than you're trying to pass it off as.
I'm not saying making a talent debate here. I'm making how we played, how impactful we've been so far this year. I also think Max XXX Crosby has been very good so far this year. Let's give some love to production and not love to just what your draft grade would be if you came out today.
He's tied for second in sacks still after missing games.
Yeah, he missed 2 games or 1 game and they had a bye.
Yeah, I think that's the case. The latter.
All right, Bryce, you can have Bosa. I get Garrett. We will play each other and I'll win.
Depends on what the rest of the team looks like. I've seen you rank quarterbacks in the past hour.
Okay, coming in number 3, I have the best pass rusher in the game right now in Matt Judon. The highest in pass rush total points, most sacks at 11.5, the most pressures. He's also tied for 3rd in tackles for loss. He's really brought a lot of stability to a Patriots defense, or Patriots team in general that's kind of struggling. And he's kind of brought them hope that maybe going into the next half of the season, they can make a push for the playoffs. So I think he's kind of been as dominant as ever.
Yeah, I mean, since they've signed him, he's just been nothing but spectacular for them defensively. And I think he's done nothing if anything, he's taken a step forward so far this year in what he's been able to do, particularly as a pass rusher. Bryce, I wanted to quote your stat, the pass rush pressures above expectation. So looking at based on where you're lined up, how much we'd expect you to get pass rush. Each of the last 3 years, he's been above 5% above expectation in terms of pressures above expectation. So that's a big number, and that's going to put you in the top 10 in that category every year. That's really exhibiting that it's not just that he's in advantageous situations. He's as impactful as they come defensively.
Yeah, when you're getting above average production coming from an edge rushing spot and not coming from the interior, that's exactly what you're saying. It's high expectation and high production given that expectation. I will note that both Garrett and Bosa are closer to the 8-9% above expectation. So,
and they're leading the league right now.
They're towards the top there. I mean, the plus 10% is very good.
Yeah, it's Aaron Donald range.
I think Parsons, right? Last time I checked, it was a couple of weeks ago. Parsons was first at that 10 plus 10.
That would not surprise me. I'll pull that as you move on to your number 2 on the list.
Yes, number 2, I'm sure Alex will is James Bradbury getting away from the pass rush mold. He's been as lockdown can be. He's first in pass coverage total points. He's faced the 4th most targets this year, but he's still 2nd among corners in EPA per target, which is ridiculous. He's got 3 interceptions this year, which puts him in the top 10. He's got the lowest quarterback rating against at 13.6, and he's 4th among secondary players in general in yards per attempt. He's really anchored a secondary to an Eagles defense, bringing him in from free agency. That's really been top notch and has certainly been a big part in why they're top 5 in defensive efficiency so far this year. And I know we're getting away from the pass rush stuff, but I think he's been one of the most influential non-pass rushers. We'll see at number 1, but yeah, that's my number 2 guy.
Yeah, they've done a great job of getting a lot of guys to fill out that defensive backfield that was pretty bare a couple years ago, and taking him from a division rival who knew that the Giants were going to be actually good enough to be a competitor this year. But yeah, what you said about having high target rate and also very low production per target, that's the dream, right? I mean, aside from the sort of Darrelle Revis, don't even throw it on my half of the field thing.
I think that's the dream, yeah.
Sure, but short of that, which is once in a generation type situation, being able to sustain high volume of targets and clamp down on it is really valuable.
So one other guy, I think he's tied for the lead in corner total points among corners this year. Tyson Campbell from Jacksonville. You could say a similar story about him. I was looking at it. He's averaging 5 targets per game for 26 total yards allowed. You can see how that's going to help you win football games if that's what happens when you get targeted there. The other guy tied with Bradbury and Campbell is Patrick Surtain, the 2nd out in Denver. We've talked about before. He's been absolutely unbelievable. A little bit more in the target suppression mold. Be interesting to see if Bradbury can maintain his total points lead against his teammate, Big Play Slay, as the year goes on. I wonder how they'll continue to match up and deploy those guys.
Well, remember, Darius Slay had that game where he should have had like 6 interceptions.
That was a pretty good game.
Who's that? I think he got 3. Who was that against?
Dallas, they had a bunch of like tipped balls and such.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, big play like that's part of the. If you're don't try to project cornerback performance. it's not a good plan. A guy who's getting targeted a lot is going to allow, if there's also the like Trayvon Diggs model of like you're inviting a lot of targets and you're sort of trying to trap quarterbacks and jump the ball and allow a lot of big plays. Like that's not what's happening with Bradbury, but like that is the sort of thing that can happen to you. And then it's on the reverse situation, like with Slay, if you get a bunch of turnovers, sure, you can be more valuable, but it's tough to bank on that.
It was the Vikings game I was thinking of.
Those one-loss Vikings.
So the Vikings game in week 2, where he put up 4.3 total points. Looking at that, 10.6 hand-on ball percentage from that game. It's not something you see every day. All right, cool. I think we gave enough love to the other corners there, along with Bradbury. James, who do you got at number 1?
Well, I think that would have to be the favorite for Defensive Player of the Year at this point in time, and that would be Micah Parsons.
The listeners can't see this, but James is wearing a Penn State hoodie right now. Just throwing
full disclosure.
Full disclosure. It's no bias at all.
He's also correct right now. So despite whatever clothes he's wearing, he's also correct.
Yes,
he understands the rules of the game, Bryce.
For sure. And it's not even because Parsons is high up in a lot of, he is high in a lot of statistical categories, but he obviously hasn't been at the top. He's, still only tied for 3rd in tackles for loss, which is high, tied for 3rd in pressures. He's only top 15 in pass rush total points, but he's just everywhere on the field. He's making game-changing plays. You think of the scoop and score against the Bears. You think of the game-ending strip sack against the Rams. He's just flying all over the field, making plays, and being the best defensive player on the best defense in the NFL. It's certainly going to carry a lot of weight to it.
He's only 28th in total points among linebackers. So I'm seeing a lot of bias here, but yeah, it's tough. This happens a lot with baseball as well. It's like trying to measure flexibility, like, talking about like Shohei Ohtani being able to play multiple positions at once. Like what is the value of that versatility? It's tough to capture that. And so a guy who can do what he can do is going to sort of systematically be undervalued a lot of the time when you're using any kind of metric. So whatever he's doing, you can sort of like stack on top of the production, just the fact that he can provide the flexibility to do all those things.
Yeah, I've been interested in seeing, they've really shifted the amount that they've aligned him as an edge this year. So last year, 36% edge, 58% off ball. This year, 73% edge, 26% off ball. So you can see the difference there. I think early in the season, we saw a lot of really good returns from that. Some of the game-changing plays that he made in those games. But actually, he has had a lot of value from the versatility. So I'm curious to see as they move forward, like on a game-by-game level. There were a couple of games, right? So if you go through on a game-by-game level, looking early October against Los Angeles, he's only on the edge 63% of the time, spending more time off the ball. Completely gets away from that against the Lions. The Lions, he's 100% edge. And then against the Bears, he's 80% edge. So is that something, are they feeling him out in terms of where they want to use him? Where does that exactly end up? I tend to think that he has the ability to create value both as a pass defender and as a pass rusher. But you probably do want it to be more like 80% rushing just with somebody like him. All right, James, anything else you wanted to add on Micah Parsons?
Nope, that's all for me. We are.
I did take a look. He is plus 7% pressures above expectation. So
it was like plus 12. He was plus 12
11.8 last year, which is crazy. It's crazy. Even given that you would expect a bunch of pressures from places like where he comes from, but still he outperforms the expectations over and over again. All right. Well, James, that was a good list except for Nick Bosa. We'll move on to our last segment. Alex, what kind of awards do we have?
All right, we have some dumb ones. We're gonna get to the one that sort of we've already talked about first, and there's some additional context you can choose to apply to it without just like total production. But the best offseason receiver trade, we had the 3 big trades of AJ Brown, Tyreek Hill, and Devontae Adams. And realistically, Devontae Adams will not receive any votes in such a thing, although his production is still pretty good. Like he's still top 10 in total points from a receiver perspective. So like he's been fine, just not at the level that Brown and Hill have been. But like in terms of the actual like value of the trade and like the value of the contract, like I might take Brown given the contract and that sort of thing, and there a little bit more flexibility compared to the cost to acquire and pay Hill. But Hill has
Show us your hoodie. Show us your hoodie.
My hoodie is not. I have no such apparel on right now. But yeah, I might choose Brown just in sort of integrating in the value there. But I would definitely take Hill as like the most productive of the two this year.
Yeah, for sure. So if you're changing the rules from best player to best trade, I think the AJ Brown trade, I mean, they gave up a lot for Tyreek Hill and they paid him a lot. I think it was considerably less in the case of AJ Brown. So hard to disagree with that one. Although they've worked out pretty well for both teams.
Yeah, hard to argue. And yeah, we'll not talk about the Raiders.
No, it's fair to point out that Devontae Adams has been good than a lot of people realize, if they're not playing fantasy football or whatnot.
Yeah. Okay. Next is the guy most likely to devastate a fan base. And I'm going to give that award to, so first of all, I'll give that award to Vikings kicker Greg Joseph, who is, first of all, kicking for the Vikings. Vikings fans know a little bit about kicking issues in the playoffs, and they're riding high right now, but they're always hanging by thread. And he's made only 1 of 6 field goals of 50 plus yards this year. And in terms of our expected field goal percentage model, the only two guys who have made fewer kicks relative to expectation don't have a job right now. So like it's a little stressful, I would imagine, for Vikings fans as we go through the year with a guy who might be struggling a bit. Yeah,
it makes it very scary when you just have no faith in that guy whatsoever.
And he's been good. Like it's really only the deeper kicks, but like that's the sort of kick that you got to have sometimes.
Right. Surprising nobody, Justin Tucker leads kickers in total points.
Clockwork. All right. So next is the wonkiest defensive back season. Again, this is sort of like a choose your fighter type thing. We talked about defensive backs and sort of the volatility there. 3 guys who are in the bottom 10 in pass coverage points saved this year: J.C. Jackson, A.J. Terrell, Xavier Howard. I'm sure that's how we all expected to happen. J.C. Jackson, unfortunately, out for the year with a knee injury, but this just shows examples of guys who are good performers. Jackson and Terrell were top 3 in pass coverage points saved last year. Howard was top 30, and now they're all at the bottom. None of them have an interception this year. Just sort of an example of some weird stuff that happens when you're a defensive back in the NFL.
Yeah, injuries get mixed in there, but like each of these guys has not performed well to this point this year. You'd think Xavier Howard, now that he's getting his health back, should be a little bit better going forward, but in the case of J.C. Jackson, his injury might have saved him from what was going on with him, which was like inexplicable.
Yeah, he was allowing 72% completions against him, which is not great.
Hard to do. I was trying to think of a wonkier defensive back season. I couldn't think of any. Maybe Michael Jackson, a bit of a resurrection, if you will.
Yeah.
I'll put my head down and let you move on.
Okay, so I'm calling this award the Lemming Award for jumping off of a cliff, and we'll award this to Jonathan Taylor, who led the NFL in rushing total points last year and is 3rd worst this year, and has had some injuries. And what's weird is at a glance, his rate stats are actually pretty similar. Like he is virtually identical broken missed tackle rate. He's getting hit at the line basically the same rate. He's hitting the design gap basically the same percentage of the time. He's just not getting as many explosive plays as he did last year. And some of that could be health and some of that's just randomness. But he had 8 30-plus yard rushes last year, and he has none this year. And, this is a team that's going to not really... the quarterback situation is questionable enough that they're going to see a lot of heavy boxes. And last year, he averaged 3.5 yards per carry against heavy boxes. And that number is more like 1 yard per carry this year. So he needs to be able to bust some big plays from those kind of situations. And he really has not shown the same kind of explosiveness that he did last year.
Yeah, it seems interesting. We've done our research in terms of running backs with injuries and how sometimes we see decreases specifically in that yards after contact sort of area. On the other side of the equation, Derrick Henry continues to not fall off of a cliff.
Yeah, he's going to be an interesting
he's
case
like Tom Brady
after his career.
Right?
Yeah. Tom Brady, but in a much different position and fighting way more contact.
Yeah.
there are not very many things you can do on a football field outside of a special teams context than try to tackle Derrick Henry in the open field. That sounds really unpleasant.
You're saying thinking of unpleasant things to do?
Yeah,
I think the whole
things to do on
quarterback
football.
center exchange is not for me.
I think special teams has to be the worst, but outside of that,
like being like the kamikaze on kickoff coverage, like that kind of stuff. Yeah,
that's terrible.
I mean, like being a gunner is not bad or like anything like that. That stuff's fun.
But
I think the worst jobs, being a holder, I don't have good enough hand-eye coordination, so that would not be.
Well, and you can end up like Tony Romo in a wild card game, just sitting there.
I could never end up like that. If you trusted me to get into that situation, you would have made a very bad mistake. Catching a left-footed punter.
Who would rather try to catch a left-footed punter than put those on level footing? Like try to catch a left-handed punt or a left-footed punt versus trying to tackle Derrick Henry in an open field with a full head of steam coming at you?
Well, there is context there. If you're trying to catch a left-footed punt and you know that there's like a bunch of dudes running really fast at you that are trying to tackle you, then yes, that is potentially just as concerning because you're not even looking at them.
I can try to fair catch a ball. I can't try to fair catch Derrick Henry. I might. I'll muff the punt and probably get smacked. But
I think I've told you guys a story when I was with the Saints. We played the Vikings, and Adrian Peterson took a toss sweep, and he's running out towards me where I'm standing on the sideline. And I remember just my heart racing and me feeling like I needed to like run behind something to get away from this stallion that was coming at me and was going to end everything that I held dear in my life. And then he ran out of bounds, and I realized I was like 15 feet from the sideline. I wasn't anywhere close to him when I had all of those feelings. But no, yeah, I'd take the left-footed punt.
So my last award is Clutch Performer, and I'll give this to Justin Fields, who we've mentioned already a couple times today. He has had a pretty interesting last few weeks and has accumulated nearly half of his total points this year in what we would think of as high leverage situations. So this is basically a situation where the average change in win probability from that game state is at least double the average situation. His 8 best plays by total points are all runs, which is probably not that surprising. And none of them were designed runs. And half of those of his best plays have come in high leverage spots. So, and this is not necessarily like all fourth quarter, the things that you think of as like super clutch time, but it is, third and fourth down, even if it's in the second quarter, if it might be the second quarter of a close game and a big play, sort of outside field goal range, that kind of stuff. And he's performed pretty well. To this award, I'll also give special dispensation for Matt Ryan, who has accumulated more total points in high leverage situations than he has total. So he was negative for every other play. And that's because half of his top 25 plays by total points came in high leverage. And that includes the game-winning touchdown, which was on 3rd and 13 against the Jaguars a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy thinking about where the Colts started off this season with Matt Ryan. And especially when you think about also like Matt Ryan really not being that bad. Like I know at the time everybody's like, oh, Matt Ryan, he's washed. And now you're kind of like, man, I wonder if we did that a little bit too soon. But on the Justin Fields front, I have no idea about being clutch or not clutch, but this dude is completely transformed in terms of the way that they're using him. Designed runs. I'm going to do some quick math right now, though. But over the first 6 weeks of the season, they had 11 designed runs with Justin Fields. Over the last 3 weeks, we got 22. That's a big part of what's gone on there. That's a big part of the story is just they've absolutely changed the way that they've used him. He's become a really productive player by being kind of mediocre passing, doing just enough passing, and really being buoyed by his performance as a runner. And you can actually see a really good developmental path for Justin Fields going forward now, to the point where I ask ironically, like, would you rather have him or Jalen Hurts? Because I think it is a fascinating question and an interesting barometer of how people think about football.
I think it's worth noting that Fields has also sped up his process a little bit. It doesn't look like he's thinking back there as much as it did in his rookie season at the start of the year. I think the game is starting to slow down for him a little bit.
We can see that. So just in terms of like game by game accuracy, his on target percentage, he's been on target with at least 2/3 of his passes each of the last 2 games. And he wasn't above 60% in any of the games prior this year. So he's definitely seeing the ball, seeing the game a little bit better. and he's had pretty excellent rushing production to go with this kind of renaissance from a passing perspective. So it's a pretty interesting combination.
They're also not forcing him under center, which they had been doing early in the season a bit more, and they've abandoned basically, which I think helps when you spent your entire life in shotgun to not have to make that adjustment as you adjust to the challenges of playing in the NFL. All right. Appreciate it. Those are some good awards. All right. We're over time, so we will wrap it up. Don't forget to check out the SIS Baseball Podcast hosted by Mark Simon. Don't forget to check out the Bill James Handbook, which was recently released, the 2023 Bill James Handbook for anybody who's into that sort of stickball. And for everybody else, we'll be here. Check our stuff out at sportsinfosolutions.com, the33rdteam.com, and anywhere else that you can find SIS at sportsinfo_SIS. And we will be back to break down the beginning of the second half of the season next week. For our producer, Justin Stein, and our guests, James Weaver, Bryce Rossler, and Alex Vigderman, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.